Hello and welcome to this poster design tutorial. If you want to create a really dynamic and fresh typographic poster in Adobe Illustrator, then this is the video for you. So here I am in Illustrator and these are some posters I created earlier. In this video, we'll be looking to create a poster for a sneaker company looking to promote its product line where we will be using photography, typography, and graphic images as part of the poster design. In this video, I'll be demonstrating how to use the tools of Illustrator to create this poster design specifically, and later we will look at how to make some variations. To create this poster in Illustrator, we are going to cover the following key steps. Step 1, project folder setup. Step 2, document setup. Step 3, grid setup. Step 4, working with type. Step 5, working with image. Step 6, working with color. Step 7, refine composition. Step 8, create layout variations. And Step 9, exporting. This is a methodical process that will ensure we create quality poster designs and not leave anything unchecked. So be sure to check the bookmarks in the video so you can jump back or ahead at any time. After this video, you will be able to create dynamic posters like this in Adobe Illustrator super easy. So let's get into it. So here I am in Illustrator and these are some dynamic posters I created earlier using the techniques I am about to demonstrate. If we were to take a look at these, you can find them in the class project folder. These are located in folder 2, poster templates. If you open the Illustrator folder, you should be able to see the file called Lunar Lift. So in the Illustrator poster document, what I have done here is develop a poster design from one of my sketches, which I have here, and I have looked at how this could work in different variations with different fonts with a light and dark color approach. Now, if I come up to view and click off trim view and press Command: on Mac or Control: on PC, I can toggle on and off the guides where you can see the grid system that I have used to structure this poster design. So your 11th task for this class is to follow along with my poster design method. The purpose of this task is for those of you who may be unfamiliar with Illustrator. This is a chance to learn crucial techniques and get comfortable working in Adobe Illustrator. Now, this stage is optional. You can either watch and participate or follow along and develop your own poster design. However, I will be encouraging you to do this later. So let's now jump into Illustrator and look at how we can develop a poster like this. And we are going to start with step 1. Now, as demonstrated in previous poster tutorials, a step I always like to take before I begin any project is to set up a project folder. This is going to set me up to be super organized and have a place to keep all my assets and know where everything is. When working in Illustrator, it helps to be organized to improve your workflow. So I can either set this up from scratch or I can duplicate a folder I created earlier in the class. So if you've not already done this as part of the class, go into the class download folder, into the design process folder. The last folder called project folder will have some additional folders inside. These folders are going to help us organize our project. So to begin, I would recommend you copy this folder and paste it somewhere you will be able to access through this part of the class. For now, I'm just going to save all my files into the folder I created earlier in the class. Once you have your project folder set up, let's start artworking the poster. So in Illustrator, to begin, I'm going to set up a new document. I'll come up to File, New, and select Document. Now on this occasion, I'm going to use a standard print size document. So on the top tab, I'll click Print. I'll click View All Presets. I'll select A3. Over on the right, I'll make sure my orientation is set to portrait. I'll set the units to millimeters. I'll set my bleed to 3 millimeters, and I'll do this because some printers like a 3 millimeter bleed when sending off to print. So I'll just do this at the start. I'll set my color to RGB and make sure my raster is set to 300 and click Create, and up will pop my new document. Now you may be wondering why I set it to RGB. Well, I like to start with RGB because if I decide to use this artwork for a digital composition later, perhaps for a social media post, it's not easy to change the colors from CMYK to RGB. However, it is easy to convert the colors into CMYK from RGB. So to avoid extra work in future, I like to start with RGB. So here we have our new document set up, and you can see around the outside we have the bleed line. Now for those who don't know what that is, it's where you extend your artwork off the canvas area. So when a printer cuts the artwork, they can trim a little bit off so you don't get white borders. Again, if I press Command: on Mac or Control: on PC, I can toggle on and off the guides to toggle on and off the bleed line. Now, if you're following along, make sure you can see your control panel at the top of your UI. If not, come up to Window and make sure there is a tick next to Control. Now, you're also going to need to have your swatches, layers, and links panel visible. So make sure to come up to Window and click them to activate and have them to hand. In this instance, I have a lot of these panels down the side here. So that's our document set up, and before we continue, I like to save it. So I'll come up to File, Save As, and navigate to the project folder we set up earlier. In the second folder, Concept and Design, into the Design folder, and I'll save it in the Illustrator folder and call this Lunar Lift. Okay, so before we start adding any visual elements, I want to set up a grid. Now, looking back at one of my original sketches, I really like this idea here of having a typographic poster and having the product image set on top of the product name repeated in the background. I like the idea of this being a symmetrical design, and since the product is called Lunar Lift, I thought it would be cool to have it floating in the middle in space, with perhaps a cropped moon coming in from the top and the bottom, and perhaps some footer elements positioned at the side. Now, this was a really rough sketch initially, but when I looked at this poster design a little closer in a scamp draft, I worked out that to lay all my elements out neatly, I would position everything in columns. For this poster design, I determined that I would need a column grid of 16. Here you can see how I want to position my type aligned in the center, so I can have a nice clear space left and right, with approximately 2 columns on each side. Now, in my sketch here, I did not account for a margin space around the poster. So when I come to setting this up, I think I'm going to look to include one. Now, setting up a grid in Illustrator is a little different from setting a grid up in InDesign. There are various ways to do this, but here is a really good tip on how to set up a column grid in Illustrator. So to begin, I want to establish my margin space. To do this, I'll come up to Illustrator Settings on Mac or Edit on PC and click Units. With the menu open, I'll be sure to set General to millimeters and click OK. I'll come over to the Shape tool, grab the Rectangle tool and draw a box to the full size of the canvas area. Next, I'll come up to Object, Path and click Offset Path. When the menu appears, I'll type in -10 and set miter limit to 0 and click OK. And this will reduce the size of the box by 10 mils. So I now know that there is a 10 mil margin around my canvas area. Okay, so now to set the grid. So with my shape selected, I'll come up to Object, down to Path, come across and select Split into Grid. Upon click, a menu will appear. First, I'll click on Preview, and up in the rows, I'll leave this to 1. In the columns, I'll set this to 16. In this instance, I'll leave the gutter set to 0. Notice now how the grid is set into the shape. Once happy, I'll click OK. Now this is where the magic happens. So with the block still selected, I'll come up to View, scroll down to Guides, come across and select Make Guides. Upon click, we will now transform the block into guides, which we can now use for our poster design. To finish, I'll come over to the Layers panel, double click on the top layer and name this Grid. And now I have a nice column grid I can begin to develop my poster with. And if I press either Command: on Mac or Control: on PC, we can toggle on and off the guides. Perfect. So with my margin, guides and bleed setup, I can now begin to compose my visual elements on the page. Now, depending on your design, sometimes it can be easier to start with an image element for the poster. But for this particular design, I want this to be heavily type-based and include the image on top. So to begin, I'm going to start with the type elements in the background. So looking back at my sketch, I want the main heading type on the poster to sit at the top of the poster and for the name of the product to repeat in the middle. On this occasion, I think I'm going to work my way out from the middle, so I'll start with the repeated bit of type in the middle. To start, I'll come over to the Tools menu, I'll select the Type tool and click once in my poster. Upon click, this will create a type element. Right now, I have a default font applied, but that's okay, I'm not going to worry about that too much right now. So looking at my sketch, I want to place some repeated text in the middle with the name of the product. So I'll jump into the poster contents doc, and I can do this by coming into the class download folder, into the Bolts Media Kit folder and double clicking on the content deck shortcut to open in browser. On page 4, I'll see the product names. I'll copy the product name for Lunar Lift. Back into Illustrator, I'll paste this in, and now we have our first bit of text. Now, depending on your default properties, here I'll just push the type up a little bit to fit on the poster. With it selected, Up in the control panel, I'll select Align Center, and I'll also click and drag on the corner pin while holding Shift to scale the type up or down like so. So with my first piece of type in the poster, I'll quickly want to change the typeface for this. So at this point, I could use any typeface, but I already have an idea of what I want to work with. In a previous step, I undertook some type research where I looked at a range of typefaces I'd like to use. Now, on the first page of my research, I quite like the look of this typeface here. The reason for that is because of its condensed nature. Looking at the scamp drawing, we can see that I need a condensed type in order to capture this stacked, repeated text. With its large cap height to letter width, this is a particularly condensed typeface. So a good option if you want to fit a wide word on your poster design across the page. Also, this typeface has a very distinct look and feel with its slight indentations, which gives it a bit of a flair. This is a very bold and impactful font that would work really well in my design solution. So this is an Adobe font and can be used for free if you have an Adobe account. You can find the link in the typeface PDF in the class download folder in folder 1 Design Process, in folder 5 Typography. If you open the PDF, you can simply click the font and it will take you to the link. Now, if you're watching this and you do not have an Adobe account, for whatever reason, for now, I'd recommend you use BBAS, which is a free font which you can get by clicking on BBAS on the type PDF. This is another condensed font that should work just fine. So back in Illustrator, I'll select the type and up in the font selector, I'll type in Zoom and apply the font. Now I'll quickly double click into the type, and while holding Alt, I'll hit right a few times to push out the tracking a little and add more space between the letter forms. Once I feel that's looking nice, I'll click on the selection tool, grab the corner and scale up so it touches the last but one column like so. So looking back at the sketch, I want to repeat this product name around 4 times in the middle of the page. This can be done really easily. So I'll double click into the type, select all the type, copy, then hit right on the keyboard to place the corner at the end of the type. I'll simply press enter and paste, enter and paste, and enter and paste until I repeat it 4 times. And next I need to tweak the leading. So again, I'll double click into the type and select it all, then down in the character panel, I'll be sure to adjust the leading, and I'll pull this in until I have something that looks like this. So now I have this type element in the middle of the poster, I can move on to the next. So looking at my sketch, I want to include the header at the top. So back into Illustrator, I'll select the type, and while holding Alt, I'll click and drag up to duplicate the type above. Back into the contents deck, on page 3, I need to focus on the type for option 1. I'll select the word evolve, I'll copy, and back into Illustrator, I'll double click into the type, press Command A on Mac or Control A on PC to select all, and I'll paste. Next, I'll do the same. Back into the contents deck, I'll select the first part, Experience Sneaker. Then back into Illustrator, double click on the new type layer, select all and paste. Now this is way bigger than I want, and here I'm also going to use another typeface to give more prominence to the header type below. To complement the bold sans serif typeface in the header, I want to look for a clean sans serif typeface, nothing that is going to compete too much. Looking back at my type sheets, on the first page, there is one typeface I thought looked like it could work quite well. For my secondary typeface, I chose to go with Archivo. This looks like a nice clean sans serif and comes with a huge font family with a huge range of weights. This typeface has a very subtle personality and flair that will work really well in my design to complement the header typeface. Now what's great about this typeface is that it's a free Google font. Simply click on Archivo in the typesheet dock and you can acquire it. So back in Illustrator, I'll select the type, and up in the font selector, I'll type in Archivo. I'll select medium and apply the font. With it still selected, I'll reduce the font size to 30 points, and down in the type panel, I'll click on the all caps button. I'll press and hold Alt on the keyboard and press right a few times on the keyboard to increase the tracking, so it's around 200 in the type panel. Easy. So with the selection tool, I'll click on my middle bit of type here, and then over in the tools menu at the bottom, I'll hit the swap fill and stroke button once, and that will apply a stroke around the outside of my type, and now we have some nice contrast between the type layers. Next, I'm going to place in the paragraph text that will appear below the repeated type. This time, I'm going to use a different technique. With the type tool selected, I'll come down and click and drag a type box from the second column across to meet the last but one column, and upon release, I will create a type box. Back in the contents deck, on page 3, I'll select the paragraph contents for option 1. Back into Illustrator, I'll paste in the new text. I'll click into the box and press Command A on Mac or Control A on PC to select all. I'll change the font size to 23, make sure the font is set to Archivo Medium, and click on the drop down for leading in the type panel and select Auto. If the type is in all caps, I'll be sure to click off the all caps button. And now I have my first paragraph of type, and I'll also make sure that it's aligned center up in the control panel. So that will be good for now. So looking back at the sketch, we can see that under my logo at the bottom, I want to include a slogan. This is a single line, so it will require me to duplicate a single line below. So just like before, I'll select the top piece of type, press and hold Alt and drag below. Into the contents deck, I'll select the header from option 2. In Illustrator, I'll paste in the type and change the font to size 16 and adjust the tracking to 100, and I'll leave this at the bottom for now. So looking back at my scamp, I also wanted to include 4 footer elements on the side of the page here and include an icon in between. So I need to place 4 pieces of type here going up the side of the page vertically. So a quick technique you can use to do this neatly. So first I'll press Command Y on Mac or Control Y on PC to enter into outline mode. Now, when we enter into outline mode, we can see the bounding box around the paragraph type. Okay, so I'll select the type tool, and in the pasteboard area, I'll click and draw out a block of type like so. Not too wide and not too tall. Next, I'll come up to the control panel and look to click the Align Center button next to the Area Type option. This will set the type neatly in the center of the box vertically. And I'm also going to make sure that this type is aligned center horizontally next to the paragraph option. Perfect. Okay, so next, with the selection tool, I'll click and drag while holding Alt on the keyboard to drag and duplicate across until the end meets like so. Upon release, I'll press Command D on Mac or Control D on PC, and that will duplicate another box. And I'll press that again, and that will duplicate a 4th box. So with the selection tool, I'll click to select all 4 boxes. I'll press R on the keyboard to activate rotate. I'll click and drag up on the mouse while holding Shift to snap to 90 degrees. Then I'll move them across and into my poster design and place them in the center on the very last column. With them all selected, I'll come up to the top middle anchor and click and drag up or down to fit perfectly into the height of my column grid like so. And I'll press Command Y on Mac or Control Y on PC to come out of outline mode, and we can see the 4 stacked pieces of type sitting there nicely. So now it's just a case of quickly changing the font and adding the type. So I'll click into the bottom box and press Command A on Mac or Control A on PC to select all, and I'll type out now. Then back into the content deck, I'll select each footer element and come and paste them into the remaining 3 boxes. Then I'll select the top text box, press and hold Shift and select the 3 below until I have all 4 selected. Down in the character panel, I'll change the font to Archivo Thin, set the font to 13 points, adjust the tracking to 250, and click the All Caps button to make sure the text is in all caps, and click Off. Next, I'll select the bottom footer element, press and hold Alt, click and drag over to the left to place at the bottom of the first column. Into the copy deck, I'll select the web address, back into Illustrator, paste it into the type box, and align the type with the bottom footer on the right. I'll click off with the selection tool, I'll press Command colon on Mac or Control colon on PC to toggle off the guides, and now I have all my type elements inside the poster. So looking back at my sketch, we can see that for this poster, I want to include an image of the product in the middle as if hovering in space on top of the type. This image will become the primary hook for the poster, the attention grabber. Now looking at the content deck, on the product lineup page, there is a product here called Lunar Lift. This is the composition with a complete pair of sneakers, composed in a way that looks like they are floating. Looking at my poster design, I initially planned this out by drawing a different shoe, but for the artwork, I'm going to use the right product for this poster. So let's see how we can get this image into our poster. So first, let's jump into the class download folder and into the Bolt Media Kit folder. This is the folder that the client has supplied, which includes everything we need to design the posters. So I'll come into the product images folder and start by opening the Lunar Lift image in Photoshop. So this is the product image that has been supplied to us. And right now, as it stands, this image is not going to work because for my design, I want to have this image cut out. So for this poster design, I'm going to have to cut the sneaker out first. Thankfully, this is a very clear image here, so it should be very straightforward to cut this out. So I'll just zoom in here to get a better view. And what we can do here is come over to the rectangle marquee tool. I'll draw a selection around it, and up in the control panel, I'll click Select and Mask. With the quick selection tool selected, up in the control panel, again, I'll click select subject, and Photoshop will do its best to select the sneaker. Now, if I zoom in here, I can see that it's not perfect. Now, there is another thing you can do here. Over in the Tools menu is a button called Object Selection Tool. If I click this and move my mouse over the sneaker, Photoshop will see what I'm trying to select as an object. If I click this once, I will see all the imperfect bits have magically been brought back, and this is looking a bit better. And I can also click on the left to select the other shoe and improve the selection there as well. Now, if I zoom in on this towards the top, I can still see some bits that need to be removed. I can do this easily by clicking on the polygonal lasso tool. And if I press and hold Alt, the icon will turn to a negative. If I start to click around, once I get back to the start, then double click to commit to the selection, it will take that part away. So I'll do this on the other side to fine tune the selection. Once I'm happy with it, I can click OK in the bottom right corner and a selection will be made. With the new selection, I can come over to the Layers panel, and at the bottom I can click the Add Layer Mask button. Upon clicking, I have now added a layer mask and cut out the sneaker. Perfect. Now, I don't want the image to be this large. I don't need the space around the sneaker here. So I'll come into my Layers panel, press and hold Command on Mac or Control on PC and click on the layer mask. Upon click, a selection around the sneaker will be made, and if I now press C on the keyboard to crop, a crop box will appear around the sneaker. At the top in the control panel, I make sure Delete Crop Pixels is unchecked and press Enter twice, and that will crop the image. Perfect. So I'll press Command-Shift-S on Mac or Control-Shift-S on PC to save. I'll navigate to the project folder I set up earlier and save this into the Assets folder as Lunar Lift PSD. So now I have a sneaker image nice and prepared. I can now bring this into Illustrator. So back into Illustrator, before I bring in my new image, I'm going to do some housekeeping. So over in the Layers panel, I'll come and click the plus icon on the bottom layer. This will add a new layer and I'll call this Images. Now, something you can keep in mind here with the Layers panel, if we click on the top right menu and come down to Panel Options, for example, we can click on Small, Medium or Large, but we also have an option here to add a custom size. If I type 70 pixels into Other and click OK, my thumbs will now be a lot bigger, so I can see a better visual glance at what's going on each layer. So now I'll click the lock icon on the grid layer so as not to accidentally select anything while I deal with the image I'm about to bring in. So with the images layer selected, I'll press Command-Shift-P on Mac or Control-Shift-P on PC on the keyboard to place an image. Here I'll navigate to the project folder, into the concept and design folder, into the design folder, into the assets folder, select Lunar Lift PSD and click place. Then click and drag a frame like so to drop in the image. Easy. So now there is an image in our document. If we now come over to the links panel, we can see the Lunar Lift PSD. If you can't see your links panel, come up to Window and click Links. This links panel is going to be very important to work with images in future, so be sure to keep an eye on this for all images in your document. So once the image is in Illustrator, it's easy to resize and position. With the image selected, if I come to any one of the anchor points, I can click and drag. If I press and hold Shift, then click and drag, you can increase or decrease the image size to scale like so. So I'll scale up the image until I'm happy and place it in the middle like so. So that's the first image in my poster. Next, I want to bring in another image that will work as a background. Now, as part of the media kit provided, there appears to be a range of images and graphical textures. Looking back at my sketch, this is going to be a very symmetrical design, and I like the idea of the moon cropping into the top and bottom parts of the image to draw the eye into the center of the poster. Now, I want my next image to be placed under everything, so I'll come over to the Layers panel, add a new layer and call this Base, and I'll be sure to click and drag this to the bottom so it's under all my other layers. And again, I'll hit the lock icon on the image layer as to not accidentally select this. So with the new base layer selected, I'll press Command-Shift-P on Mac or Control-Shift-P on PC to place in an image. I'll navigate to the Media Kit folder provided, into the Images folder, into the Texture folder, and I'll select moon.png and place. Then click and drag a frame like so to drop in the image. Now, if like me, you cannot see the image, this is because there is a white layer covering this. When we set up the grid earlier in the process, it actually created a solid white layer. So if we unlock and click into the grid layer, you will see a solid white layer. Here we can simply select this and delete, then hit the lock icon again and come back into the base layer. So I'll zoom out a bit and move up the image of the moon and scale up a little so it's positioned like so. Now, in this instance, I also want another image of the moon below. So I'll click and drag the moon down while holding Alt, and also hold Shift to make a quick copy of the moon image and drag it down perfectly straight. For now, I'll just place it down at the bottom like so. Easy. So right now I have a lot of artwork spilling out of my canvas area, which can be a little distracting. In Illustrator, there is no preview or normal mode like in InDesign. However, you can come up to View and click Trim View, and that will just remove all the visibility of everything in the pasteboard area to allow us to focus more on the poster itself. So the next image I want to bring into the poster is the logo. In the Layers panel, I'll hit the lock icon on the base layer, and this time unlock the grid layer and image layer. So this time, instead of placing a file, I'm going to open a file. So I'll press Command O on Mac or Control O on PC to open. I'll navigate to the Media Kit folder provided. Into the logo folder, I'll open bolts logo black.eps. So since we are working in Illustrator and working in vector, it's easy to paste in another vector element to give us the flexibility to change the color later on. With the selection tool, I'll select the vector logo, copy and jump back into the poster and paste. The logo will now be placed into the dock, and I can come to the far right middle anchor point, press and hold Alt plus Shift and click and drag inwards to scale the image down like so. And I'll simply place it at the bottom of the composition for now on top of the moon. Easy. So the last image I want to bring into this poster is the little bolt icon to sit in between the type elements on the right footer. So just like the logo, I'll press Command O on Mac or Control O on PC to open. I'll navigate to the Media Kit folder provided, into the Icons folder, and I'll open Bolt Icon Black EPS. With the selection tool, I'll select the vector icon, copy and jump back into the poster and paste. I can come to the far right middle anchor point, press and hold both Alt and Shift, and click and drag inwards to scale the image down. I'll zoom in, scale down to a size I'm happy with, and I'll simply place it in between the top two elements of type. I'll click and drag the icon down while holding Alt, and also hold Shift to make a quick copy of the icon image and drag it down perfectly straight in between the next type element. I'll do it once again and press Command 0 on Mac or Control 0 on PC to fit the canvas area to the work area, and now we can see we have our image elements in the poster. Now looking back at the sketch, there is one additional element that I want to include. As a small design detail, I also want to include the model number to sit up on the top left of the middle type. So for this, I want the typeface to be really condensed like the header title here. So I'll select the header type and drag across into the pasteboard area. And if I cannot see this, I'll come up to View and make sure Trim View is off. I'll come into the poster content deck and I'll copy the product number from the product page back into Illustrator and paste, and I'll also add the word model before it. I'll click on the selection tool to select the type, and I'll change the weight to light. I'll hold down Alt and press left on the keyboard to pull in the tracking. I'll bring the font size down to 32. I'll press R to activate rotate, click and drag up while holding Shift to snap to 90 degrees, then drag it back into the poster design and position it to align to the top of the repeated type in the background, and also make sure it sits comfortably in the middle of the column to the left. Now for one last detail. I'll click on the image layer, zoom in, I'll click on the line tool, then come just under the type and click and drag down to just over the sneaker image. Upon release, I'll come into the stroke panel and set the weight to 1. Click in the stroke color and make sure it's set to black. And on the end point, I'll click the drop down and select the circle. I'll click on the selection tool, click off to deselect, press Command : on Mac or Control : on PC, toggle on the guides to see my grid, and zoom out to take a look. And that will just create a small little detail where the product is labeled. So up to this point, we have been working to get all our elements into the composition. At this point, everything is now in the poster, but it's important to keep in mind that nothing is final yet. I still have some tweaking to do to get this all perfect. Now everything is in the poster, we can now start to think about color and finalizing our design. So when it comes to poster design, I typically don't start thinking about color until the overall poster composition is in a good spot. I typically work in black and white, and once everything is in, I can then start sampling colors and applying colors. So for my poster design, I don't have any specific colors planned. However, I do know that this is a moon themed concept. I do want to keep it bright white, but with a blue twist to reflect on the color of the sneakers and the moon. So here I can take some color inspiration from the sneakers themselves to create a harmonious color theme. A cool technique we can use in Illustrator is to generate a color theme from an image. To do this is simple. So first I'll come up to View and click off Trim View so we can see the pasteboard. And I'm going to click on the image of the sneakers, press and hold Alt and click and drag up to make a quick duplicate like so. With the new image selected, I'll come up to Window, scroll down to Image Trace and click to activate the panel. With the panel visible, I'll click the drop down preset and select 6 colors. And then Illustrator will process this image. So once it's done, I'll come up to the control panel and click Expand. Illustrator will process the image and turn it into vector graphics, splitting the image into various vector parts with colors you can select. So now comes the cool part. With the image selected, come into the swatches panel, click the top right menu, click the new color group. I'll name this Lunar Swatch, click OK, and now in the swatches panel, we can see a new folder with a new color group inside. So this is now a perfect start for us to use color. So I'll come back up to View, click Trim View, and come back and focus on the poster design, and now I can start applying some color. So with the selection tool, I'll first click on the large block at the top, Evolution. I'll make sure that the fill color is selected in the tools menu. Then I'll come across and select the darkest blue in my new color palette. But right now, I want this to be a lot darker. I don't want it to be black, more like a dark navy. An easy way to do this is to come to the color guide panel. With this panel open and the dark blue selected, in the guide panel you can see a range of shades and tints of that selected color. So in this instance, I want to go for a richer, darker navy color. So I'll select one of the darker shades, come over to the swatches panel, hit the menu at the top and hit New Swatch. I'll call this dark navy. On this occasion, I'll make sure to click global color and click OK. And with the type still selected, I'll come over and set my type to this new dark navy color. And that is looking more like the color I want for my type there. So even though we used the image of the sneakers to create the original theme, I then used the theme to generate a new color that I felt will be better for my overall design. Okay, so now with the selection tool, while holding Shift, I'll click on the other type elements above Evolution, select the paragraph type, select the small label type and the type under the logo to select multiple. With them all selected, I'll come into the swatches panel and click on the new dark navy color. I'll also click on the stroke, make sure the stroke color is selected, and also apply the dark navy color. Now looking at the type, I think it works, but I still want to bring some blue back into that dark color. Here I can come and double click on the dark navy color and add a little more blue back into the color by tweaking the handle on the blue value. Click OK, and because it's a global color, the new color will apply to all elements in the poster with that swatch. Easy. So next with the selection tool, I'll select the type in the middle. I'll make sure the stroke color is selected down in the tools panel and then choose one of the lighter shades of blue from the theme. I'll select the surrounding footer elements, make sure the fill color is selected, and down in the tools panel, I'll set this to the same color as applied to the middle type. So now to change the color of the logo and the bolt icons. Now because these are simple vector elements in the poster, first I'll select the logo and while holding Shift, select all the bolt icons. I'll make sure the fill color is selected down in the tools panel and change this to the dark navy color. And now we have a nice, fresh, dynamic depth of blue color in the poster, which has synergy with the sneaker image. Now this is looking nice, but I still think we could go further with the moon image in the background. Currently it's grey, but I'd like to see what a blue tint would look like to complement the overall blue tone we have here in the poster. Now I could try and apply some color effects here in Illustrator, but it may be better to go to the source. So I'll come into the links panel and here we can see the moon.png image. So I'll click this and hit the edit in Photoshop button at the bottom of the menu and now we are back in Photoshop. So currently this is a PNG and there is a really easy way to apply a blue tint to this. So first I'll jump back into Illustrator, I'll come and click on the middle type, double click on the lighter color I used and then copy the hex value. Back in Photoshop, I'll come down to the bottom of the layers panel and hit to add new adjustment layer and select solid color. Upon click, we will get a menu asking for the color and here we can paste in the hex value we just copied and click OK. By default, this has applied a mask to the layer. I'm just going to right click and delete the mask. Then I'll press and hold Command on Mac or Control on PC and click on the moon layer. Now because this is a PNG and a cutout moon, it will then create a selection of that layer. Then I'll click on the solid color layer, come and click on the add mask button at the bottom of the layers panel. Then up in the blending mode options, I'll click and drop down and hit screen, and that will apply a subtle blue tint to the moon image. Next, I'll come up to File, Save As. I'll navigate to the Project folder, into the Concept and Design folder, into the Design folder, into the Assets folder, and I'll save this as bluemoon.psd. So back in Illustrator, into the Links panel, I'll click on one of the moon images, click on the menu icon, select Relink, and choose the blue moon from the Assets folder in my Project folder, and that will update the link. I'll do the same for the other moon link, and now we have changed the moon to a blue tint. Now that's okay, but right now it's looking a little too light. So back into the links panel, I'll click one of the blue moon links, hit the edit in Photoshop button, and back into Photoshop, I'll double click on the solid fill color layer, and then tweak the color with the picker. Here I'll go with a richer, darker blue, like so. I'll click OK, press Command W on Mac or Control W on PC to save and close. Then back into Illustrator, it will say, would I like to modify my image? I'll hit yes, and then that will update both instances of the blue moon image. Perfect. Now, if I feel these images are too intense in the composition and I want the type here on the bottom to be more legible, I'll make sure the base layer is unlocked in the layers panel. I'll select both moon images, and then over in the transparency panel, I'll set the opacity to 70%. And now I think the overall color application in the poster is looking fresh, and there is a very clear hierarchy of the elements here. Now, one last thing to note, when working with poster designs with images inside, we can also look to enhance these. So in the links panel, I'll select the lunar lift image, then click the edit original button at the bottom of the links panel, and then we'll jump back into Photoshop. I'll come down and add a levels adjustment layer. I'll pull in the right handle and adjust the middle handle slightly, just to punch out the colors slightly. So here is a before and after. I'll press Command W on Mac or Control W on PC to close and save, and then back in Illustrator it will say, would I like to modify my image? I'll hit yes, and then that will update the image and add more punch. Okay, so if you've been following along up until now, well done. We have covered a lot of ground here, and this is starting to come together nicely. Now everything is in the poster design and we have the colors applied, we can now take the last step, and that is to refine the composition. Up to this point, we have been focusing on getting all the elements into the poster and applying color. Now we are in a good spot to finalize the design by focusing on the details to make sure everything is in place. What we want to do here is scrutinize the typography and the position of all the elements to make sure it's well balanced and it's all neat. So I'll come up to View and click on Trim View so I can see my pasteboard. I'll press Command : on Mac and Control : on PC to toggle on the guide so I can see my grid. So the first thing I'll address is the title header at the top. Here I'll make sure that the word evolution sits nicely in the column grid, where there are two column grids to the left and to the right, which should line up nicely with my type below. I'll select the type below and make sure it's sitting comfortably next to the large type. Again, I'll make sure that the repeated type below fits nicely in the grid, where there are two column grids to the left and to the right. I'll click on the paragraph type. Here I'll just make sure that it fits in there nicely. Here I may bring the font size down to 22 and bring the frame in a little to make sure the type fits in there nicely. I can see my footer elements on the right and left are sitting nicely in the column grids. I'll click on the logo and make sure the center anchor point are aligned to the middle grid. I'll do this for the type under it, and then click on the moon images to make sure they are accurately aligned center. I'll make sure I'm happy with the size of the sneaker in the middle of the composition. I'll zoom out, come up to View, hit Trim View, click off anything selected with the selection tool, and I can get a good view of this poster. And if there is anything I think needs some tweaking again, I can do this here. For example, I'll come down and increase the size of the moon at the bottom. Then I'll delete the moon at the top and then duplicate the moon up and put it into place so I know that these two moons are the same size proportionally. I'll tuck the tagline comfortably under the logo, move any elements around, and after some tweaking, I'll have my first poster design sorted. So right now, I'm happy with this, and I think this does justice to my original scamp design. But do we want to leave it there? Generally, when I do any design, sometimes I will have other ideas as I go through the artwork process. And one thing I like to do when designing posters is to look at other options, should there be any better solutions out there. So once I have one layout design in a good place with my type and image elements, it can be easy to quickly generate other layout variations in Illustrator. So let's quickly look at how we can do this. So first, let's look to duplicate the first page, and this can be done really easily. So first, I'll make sure all the layers are unlocked, and up in View, I'll come down to Guides and make sure that Guides is unlocked. Then in the Tools menu, click the Artboard tool, click on the canvas area, press and hold Alt and drag to the right, and upon release, you will create a new artboard, effectively duplicating your poster design. Easy. So with the second poster in place, you can now make some modifications to this one. Now, one of the easiest changes to look out for would be the font of the headline. For this, I want to continue using the font Archivo, which I apply to the rest of the type on the poster, but use a different weight. So with the selection tool, I can click the title headline frame once, then up into the font selection, I'll type in Archivo. For this, I'll change the font to Archivo Condensed Black Italic from the list, and it will change. And I'll have to do some tweaking to make it fit there. So down in the type panel, I'll set the type to all caps. I'll press and hold Alt and press left on the keyboard to bring in the tracking. Then I'll click on the right middle anchor point, and while holding Shift plus Alt, I'll scale down to fit into the column grid above the type below. Now for this poster, I want to try something a little different. Instead of repeating the product name in the middle, I want to repeat the product code and perhaps try a different typeface to get a different vibe going. So I'll toggle off the visibility of the image layer so I can just see my type. I'll double click into the repeated type block and press Command A on Mac or Control A on PC to select all. I'll type in #542. Now looking back at my typeface research, on the third sheet I looked at some more organic, rounded typefaces. Here I was looking at some interesting serif typefaces. One typeface that stood out to me that I thought I'd like to use in the poster design was Fields. This one has a unique character to it. I thought it could bring a more dynamic look and feel to the poster design. Now, this is another Adobe font and can be used for free if you have an Adobe account. If you open the Type Research PDF, you can simply click the font and it will take you to the link. And if you don't have an account with Adobe, for whatever reason, for now I'd recommend you use Cardiff, which is a free font which you can get by clicking on Cardiff on the Type PDF. So back in Illustrator, I'll set the font of this type element to Fields Black. I'll push the font size up to around 205 and push the tracking out a little so it fits into the column like so. Then it's just a case of selecting the type, copying the type, pressing right on the arrow key to set the cursor to the end, press enter and paste, enter and paste, enter and paste, and I'll do this until there are 4 instances here. Then I'll make sure the leading is fine between them, then bring back the visibility of the image layer, come up to View, click on Trim View, and we can get a good look at that. So the last thing to do would be to click on the Label tab. In here, I'll double click and change the model number to the product name. So I'll type in Lunar Lift, change the typeface to Archivo Light, set the type to 20, tweak the tracking and align next to the middle type like so until it's all neat. So right now my poster is a light mode version where everything is popping on the white. For my last version, I want to see what this could look like on a dark background. So I'll quickly duplicate the artboard again. I'll make sure that all layers are unlocked, and up in View, I'll come down to Guides and make sure that all guides are unlocked. Then in the Tools menu, click the Artboard tool, click on the canvas area of the first poster, press and hold Alt and drag to the right, and upon release, you will create a new artboard, effectively duplicating the poster. Next, I'll come over and grab the Rectangle tool. Come to the base layer and click and drag to create a shape from the top left of the bleed to the bottom right of the bleed. I'll make sure that the fill color is selected. I'll choose the dark navy color from the swatches panel, and I'll right click, scroll down to Arrange and send to black. Now on this occasion, I feel this dark blue is not dark enough. I want this color to be a lot deeper. So I'll come and double click on the fill color in the Tools menu. I'll drag the picker to the left into a more darker territory and click OK. Now I don't have to worry about the global color in the swatches panel changing here. Upon clicking OK, the color will change and the previous color will just remain unchanged in the swatches panel. So with my new dark background, I'll come and select all my type with the selection tool while holding Shift to select multiple. I'll change all the type to white. I'll click on the logo and change it to white. I'll click the stroke and set this to white. I'll select all the bolts and change them to the same light blue color as the type. I'll come up to View, click on Trim View, and now we can see the same design but now in a dark mode. So when it comes to poster design, once you have set up one poster composition, it can be easy and swift to make variations and explore other options. Now before we finish this tutorial, there is one last thing we will need to do, and that is to export our poster ready for print. So once you're happy with your artwork and you want to export ready for print, you can either export the entire document or you can export just one poster or a range. For this example, I just want to export the second and third poster here. So when you're ready to export, simply come up to File and click on Save as Copy. So here I'll navigate to the project folder and select the PDFs folder. I'll name the file Lunar Lift Poster and come down into the format and I'll choose Adobe PDF. Now you can export all, but on this occasion I'll click on Range and type in 2-3. I'll click Save and up will pop another menu. So here I'm going to make sure that for Adobe PDF preset, high quality print is selected. I'll make sure that View PDF after saving is checked. I'll come over to the left and click Marks and Bleeds and click only on Trim Marks. For bleed, I'll set this to use document bleed settings and then click Save PDF. Illustrator will do its thing and up will pop Acrobat Reader. I'll come up to View, Zoom, Fit to Height, and now I can see the poster design exported as a PDF ready to send to a printer. If I come across and click on Pages, I can see that this PDF also includes page 2, which is the darker version. If you notice around the outside, we can also see the trim marks, and this is where the printer will trim the poster after printing to ensure a clean cut with no white edges. Perfect. So that's how you can go from a really rough sketch on a page to drafting a more accurate scamp to artworking a dynamic typographic poster in Illustrator and manage the elements to create variations within the same document and export ready for print. So now you have seen how to set up and create a poster design in Illustrator. Your 12th task is to create a poster from your own design. If you have been following along and have sketched out some of your own designs, take some time to develop your own poster design. Be sure to refer to the task list PDF in the class download folder for more instructions for this task. Also, feel free to try a completely different design approach using different colors and assets from the media kit. Now try and spend around an hour or two on this exercise. And if you do create your own designs, be sure to share them in the project section below so we can all see your designs. We would all love to see what you can come up with. So this is one of many poster designs I have created in Adobe Illustrator. If you want to save yourself some time and use these poster design templates, you can get them as part of the poster design ebook. The poster design ebook includes crucial design theory to help you create professional poster design with lots of design resources, more tutorials, and includes all the poster design tutorial assets. If you want to learn more, you can check the link in the description. Well, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell button to be notified of more tutorial videos like this in future. Now this tutorial was created for all my members of the GDS Design School community. If you'd like to join the GDS Design School community, where we chat about design, give each other feedback, and where I set design challenges, you're all welcome to join for free. Again, link is in the description, and I look forward to seeing you there. So until my next design tutorial, unleash your creativity, and I'll see you next time.